All right, I'm now going to make the mistake of attempting to record a short video on an enormous topic. Had a conversation with another YouTuber called Anna's Analysis, and I first wrote to her really appreciatively because I felt that what she was doing was offering a critique of spiritual gurus, spiritual leaders here on YouTube and on Instagram, on social media, and saying, hey, this really isn't up to a high enough standard. She was asking some tough questions like, who are these people to be offering to intervene in other people's trauma, in other people's lack of self-love, self-confidence, and so on and so forth, when you think about who they are, their lack of educational background, the problems they're still struggling with, so on and so forth. In effect, she's asking, why is it that people who have nothing going for them but a pretty face on social media are managing to charge large amounts of money for selling spiritual snake oil and life advice? And what are the real consequences of this? It's a good set of questions. And I sent her fan mail initially. I spoke to her very positively, saying, hey, I appreciate that you're taking on this mantle, especially because she is vegan. And in large part, this is discourse going on within the vegan movement or over at the hippie spiritualist end of the vegan movement that I have relatively little to do with myself. However, as the conversation went on, it started to raise other really important questions about truth, honesty, and integrity, and the ways in which people get misled, especially in politics, living within a digital subculture where everyone on Instagram is posting the same kind of half-true statements without anyone doing any fact-checking, without anyone doing research or even reading. And dubious facts come to be perceived as unquestionable. And indeed, people even are offended if you question these so-called facts that are really just things people say, sometimes in a quotation superimposed on a photograph of a beautiful landscape on Instagram, or maybe on Twitter it's just text on a plain background. But it's things people have said again and again, and the people who are participating in reblogging, retweeting, thumbs up, giving the heart to these expressions, none of them are questioning where does this come from, nor what are the intentions of this being created, and where does this lead us. So a few days ago, as an example, I had a face-to-face confrontation with two police officers here who made it clear to me that they had absolutely no interest in enforcing the law, even when you were talking about people who were in possession of hard drugs, something like methamphetamine, fentanyl, or cocaine, and who had been witnessed by two people and with photographs using these hard drugs. This is possession and use flagrantly in public. The police said they had absolutely no interest in making an arrest. Interesting conversation ensued. And one of the police officers said to me self-confidently, they say we're making the transition over to having a system more like Portugal, where he alleges, these illegal drugs are permissible, where, hard drugs have been decriminalized. And I said back to him, that's just not true. In Portugal, people are arrested for possession of these drugs. People are arrested for using drugs in public or what have you. They're arrested for possession. They're just not sent to criminal court. They're sent to what's called the courts of dissuasion. It's a separate court system that just specifically handles drug addicts. So you can imagine, if you live in a big city like Los Angeles, you can imagine what advantage that would be, even bureaucratically, to have one court system that deals with all the real crime and all the other cases, and then a separate specialized set of judges, prosecutors, and what have you, who are just dealing with drug addicts, who, have a different kind of record and say, well, the last time you came to this court, we sent you to rehab and that didn't work. So now you've come back, and what are we going to do with you now? So what Portugal did was to separate and specialize the attempts to have interventions helping drug addicts from the rest of criminal law, right? But it's not the case that in Portugal it's acceptable to be a drug addict. they didn't try to normalize the use of heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine as recreational drugs. That's really just not true. Anyway, I said this briefly to the cop, and I could see on the expression on his face, one of the two cops, that this actually was familiar to him. He'd read something that sounded like that. He was like, "Oh, right." It did get through to him. But he's obviously living in a subculture or a bubble, and it may just even be other cops telling him this, or maybe messages on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, where people on the left are repeating a myth about drug laws in Portugal, about how Portugal has the solution, and the solution isn't arresting people and isn't taking people to court and isn't enforcing the law. And everyone's repeating that again and again, and none of them are doing the basic fact-checking of even just reading like one newspaper article that describes how the system works in Portugal and what its advantages and disadvantages are. Because, if you read an article like that, it wouldn't all be good news. There'd be some good and some bad to the tale to be told. So my conversation with Anna of Anna's Analysis turned to this problem of people like herself, people most definitely including herself, posting and recycling statements about Buddhism, about what is the teaching and what is the doctrine of Buddhism, that are not true, that are not accurate, that nobody has even, say, read a newspaper article about. And, she was pretty defensive and hostile from the start, but her level of aggravation escalated quickly. I mean, she ends up saying to me in this very self-righteous voice, like, how could I possibly think that it's not the teaching of the Buddha to live in the moment and to live for the moment? Now, what I've been trying to tell her up to like the very end of this conversation, up to the final portion of our speaking, I was trying to tell her in a very calm and helpful way, look, I have more than 10 years of background as a scholar of Buddhism. I actually learned Pali. I actually read the canon. I can tell you about this as much or as little as you want. And I have peer-reviewed publications, and I've been around the world. I've lived in these countries. I've studied the languages. I have this kind of depth of experience. I can tell you as much or as little as you want. But no, you're demanding of me. You're asking to know, this is very much the wording she was using. You're asking, what is the harm of you posting and recirculating these lies about Buddhism? But at the same time, you're really demonstrating to me exactly what the harm is. This is exactly the danger of fake news. Because you're acting self-righteous and offended, even when you know that I'm really an expert in Buddhism and you know nothing about Buddhism. You're self-confidently saying to me, how could it possibly be that this meme, this illustration I've posted on Instagram is wrong and you're right? How do you really mean to tell me? Like, that's just preposterous that the Buddha didn't teach people that they should live in the moment and live for the moment, all right? Now, you guys already guessed. The doctrine of Buddhism is not that people should live in the moment and live for the moment. It's not, all right? The Pali Canon teaches you many things, and maybe you could bend over backwards to take half a sentence out of context from some instructions that are being given about meditation and try to misrepresent that as if the doctrine of Buddhism is about living in the moment and for the moment. But no, that is a doctrine for self-indulgent, wealthy, white, Western people in the 21st century. And it might actually be really worthwhile for people to examine where that doctrine comes from, what motivations they have in propounding it, and what that leads to. Like, what are the consequences for your life if you start believing and living by this doctrine? But she was so self-confident, I would even say she was so self-righteous in defending her version of Buddhism, what it is she thinks she knows about Buddhism, even though that's just based on little clips of text in front of like images of beautiful scenery posted on Instagram, like these little memes, right? These little spiritual soupçons, that get put on the internet. But those quotations, they take on their sense of power because within your social circle, it's not just you who's posting them. Maybe it's all your friends. It's everyone you know who's posting them. It's other people you respect and look up to who are giving it the thumbs up or the red heart button, or who are leaving comments saying, yeah, that's a great saying, that's a good phrase. Your idea of Buddhism, or more broadly, your idea of spirituality, your idea of truth, in this way, it's almost like self-selected brainwashing. And then when you meet one person who challenges you on that, and this has happened to me many times on the internet in different political contexts, like when you meet one person who challenges you and says, wait, that's not what the law in Portugal actually is. That's not the way rehabilitation and the court system in Portugal works at all. Where did you hear that? How did you come to that conclusion? And the real answer is, it's just something all my friends seem to be saying on the internet, right? Wait a minute. That's not the teaching of the Buddha. That's not the doctrine or philosophy of the Buddha. That's not what the religion is about at all. Why did you create that image? Why did you post that image of literally putting those words in the Buddha's mouth and presenting that as the content of Buddhism? And when people come back to you with this self-righteous indignation, which is basically, how dare you interrupt my enjoyment of this long, ongoing process of the blind leading the blind? Because that's what they like. That's what they want to do. And they don't engage in that as if it were a game. They're engaging in that process of the blind leading the blind as if it were the most meaningful, as if it were the most rewarding thing in their lives. Indeed, as if it were a kind of hallowed spiritual mission, as if it had great philosophical weight for them. So we have a bit of a discourse in the 21st century questioning fake news. And stereotypically, fake news is thought of as something from the right wing and as something motivated with very definite ends, right? So maybe a stereotypical example of fake news would be right-wing conservatives spreading lies about abortion and abortion clinics. And then if you ask them about this, because they'll very often admit that what they're presenting is false or exaggerated, they will say to you that from their perspective, they're trying to save human lives. They feel that their sense of moral purpose is so important that it justifies lying or spreading this misinformation or what have you. That's maybe the stereotype. But the real danger of fake news and falsehoods being spread on social media, I feel, is that people get into participating in it all the time with no particular motivation. This girl, this YouTuber, Anna's Analysis, she doesn't think of herself as a Buddhist. She doesn't think of herself as being motivated to lie about Buddhism. She doesn't think of herself as being motivated to tell the truth about Buddhism. She's not trying to propound it. She's not trying to criticize it. She doesn't think about it this way. But she's in a subculture where she's hearing this back from so many different voices. And her own voice has joined the cacophony of making these spiritual and pseudo-philosophical pronouncements. And again, I can tell you, I've heard the tone of her voice when she was saying this. There was no way to shake her out of her sense of certainty that this is something she knows, even though she's never read a single book about it. She's never read a single newspaper article about it. And she said very self-righteously that she has friends who are Buddhists. She presumably means white Western people who don't speak any Asian language, who can't read Chinese, Japanese, Tibetan, or any of those languages, let alone Pali. It is Pali, not Sanskrit, you need to know for Buddhism. Not Burmese, not Cambodian. But anyway, it would help if you knew a language like Burmese, Cambodian, Laotian, what have you. But these are presumably white Western people who are also into yoga and spiritual quotations on Instagram. Simply through this effect of the crowd echoing back to you your own self-righteous ignorance, this sense of walking together, the blind leading the blind and loving it. There's something tremendously dangerous here. And I see the danger most of all in terms of drug policy, both in terms of the private decisions people are making to get involved with psychedelic drugs, for example, like LSD, ayahuasca, and so on the basis of the positive experiences they've heard others had, very often in the same form. A quotation from Ram Dass or a quotation from Sam Harris or one of the other people who tries to glamorize and spiritualize the use of these drugs, all the way over to the question of what do we do now in the year 2020 when we have epidemic levels of addiction to fentanyl and other opioids on the street, when we have epidemic levels of mass addiction to methamphetamines and other stimulants on the streets. Where do we go from here? And the answer can't possibly be arrived at through this self-righteous cycle of people patting themselves on the back, the blind leading the blind. Sooner or later, someone has to stand up and say, how do you know that? Why do you think you know that? Is anyone really learning these things empirically? Is anyone really open-minded enough to at least ask the right questions so that together we can share our doubts, share whatever it is we've learned, and eventually come to the right answers?